Hello, and welcome to CodeSprout's Fundamentals of JavaScript tutorial series. In this video, we will be diving into an introduction of JavaScript, the coding language that makes websites come alive. If you're just starting out on your JavaScript journey or looking to refresh your understanding, don't worry. CodeSprout is here to keep it simple, fun, and hands-on. Let's get started. In this video, we will be covering the following. What is JavaScript? A brief history of JavaScript, how JavaScript works, writing your first JavaScript program, where to write JavaScript code, and finally, tools for JavaScript development. So what is JavaScript? JavaScript is a high-level, interpreted programming language that is one of the core technologies of the World Wide Web. It is used alongside HTML and CSS. While HTML provides the structure and CSS handles the presentation, JavaScript adds interactivity to web pages. JavaScript allows you to respond to user actions such as clicks and form submissions, modify web page content dynamically, animate elements on a web page, communicate with servers to fetch or send data without reloading a web page, and build complex web applications. It's important to note that despite a similar naming convention, JavaScript is not related to Java. These are two separate languages with very different use cases and syntax. Let's now go over a brief history of JavaScript. JavaScript was created by computer scientist Brendan Eich in 1995 while working at Netscape Communications Corporation. This personal project of Eich would later revolutionize the world of programming and web development with JavaScript's unique and dynamic use cases. Over the years, JavaScript has evolved from a simple scripting tool into a powerful language used in everything from websites to servers. Key milestones like ES5 and ES6 modernized JavaScript, adding features that developers rely on to this day. So how does JavaScript work? JavaScript runs directly in your browser using a special engine. Different browsers use different engines, but each engine follows the three main steps of parsing, compilation, and execution. All this happens super fast, and JavaScript engines even handle memory for you. Even though JavaScript can only do one task at a time, it handles multiple tasks very well thanks to something called the event loop. The event loop watches over a queue of tasks, like a click, a timer, or a server response. When JavaScript finishes a certain task, the event loop checks if anything is waiting, grabs the next task, and runs it. This process keeps looping, allowing JavaScript to stay responsive and efficient, even with lots of processes happening in the background, like animations or loading data. Let's get ready to write your first JavaScript code. We will use the traditional Hello World example. This simple program will help you understand the basic syntax of JavaScript and how to run JavaScript code. Let's begin writing your first JavaScript program. You can use any IDE that you prefer or use the built-in CodeSprout playground. The first and most important concept about writing JavaScript code, or any code for that matter, is the use of comments. Depending on the coding language that you are using, there will be different methods of adding comments. In JavaScript, you can add comments by simply including two forward slashes at the beginning of a new line, followed by what you want your comment to say. Comments are directly ignored by the compiler, so they will not affect your code or program, and are very important to help keep your code organized and understandable, especially when working with large bodies of code and collaborating with other individuals. So for our hello world statement, we're simply going to explain in our comments what our code is going to do. Print hello world to the console. We can now start writing the command to print the hello world phrase to the console. To do this, we can simply type console.log followed by parentheses, and within the parentheses, we want to include two double quotes. The double quotes indicate that we'll be typing a word or a sentence. And now, in between these double quotes, we can include hello world. We can end off this command by including a semicolon. Notice that the semicolon at the end of the statement. In JavaScript, semicolons are used to separate statements, and while they're technically optional in many cases, since JavaScript does have automatic semicolon insertion, it's still a good practice to include them. As you can see in the console, we now have hello world printed out. You can also store names as variables, which is another important concept. Don't worry if some of these concepts aren't clear yet. We'll cover variables, operators, and other JavaScript fundamentals in detail in the upcoming lesson. We can also store a name or a phrase as a variable. To do so, we can simply type const and then what we want our variable to be called. If we're describing the name of a car, we could use car, or color, we can type it in as color. But in this case, since we're storing a name, I'll simply include the variable name as name, which you can then set as equaling to, and we'll go back to using the double quotes to indicate that we're typing a word or a phrase, and whatever name we choose. In this case, I'll choose the name Mark. We can even build on this further by creating another variable called greeting, which will then use the phrase greetings followed by plus and then name, which will then reference Mark. To display this greeting message, you can simply type console.log and within the parentheses implement the actual variable name itself. As you can see, we get greetings Mark without having to squeeze all of that information within our console print statement. Congratulations, you have just written your first JavaScript program. But let's try something a bit more complex. You can use the console.log command to even do calculations. To do so, we can do console.log followed by our parentheses. I'm going to start by including a string, or the double quotes, to indicate what our calculation is, which in this case we'll simply do 2 plus 3 equals. Notice how, since we're using the double quotes, the console isn't actually printing out what 2 plus 3 equals, but rather the actual phrase itself, 2 plus 3 equals. We can follow this by a comma, followed by the actual operation of 2 plus 3. As you can see, now the console is printing out 2 plus 3 equals 5. Since we are not including the double quotes here, the console is seeing these as two integer values and doing the operation of adding 2 plus 3 to give us the 5 value. Again, I do want to reiterate that you should not worry if some of these concepts aren't clear yet, as we'll be covering variables, operators, and other JavaScript fundamentals in detail in the next lesson. So where should you write JavaScript code? There are several ways to include JavaScript in a web page. Each approach has its own advantages and use cases. Let's explore the most common methods. Firstly, we have inline JavaScript. You can write JavaScript directly within HTML using the script tag. This is the simplest way to add JavaScript to a web page. For larger projects, you can use external JavaScript files. It's better to place your JavaScript in a separate file and have it linked directly within your HTML. This is the most common and recommended approach for most web development and ensures your files stay organized. There are also inline event handlers. JavaScript can also be triggered by events using the inline event handlers directly within HTML elements. Finally, we will cover important tools that you as a programmer will use throughout your JavaScript development journey. Firstly, we have text editors and IDEs. CodeSprout's built-in Playground is one such IDE that lets you write and run JavaScript code directly in your browser. Other and more advanced tools such as Visual Studio Code, Sublime Text, and WebStorm provide additional features that can help programmers build and write advanced JavaScript applications. So it's important to get familiar with these tools. You can access the download links for each of these tools within the lessons section. You have now concluded the Introduction to JavaScript tutorial here at CodeSprout. You now have a solid understanding of the history and core concepts that you will see resurface throughout your JavaScript learning journey. We implore you to read through the sections of this lesson and take the lesson quiz to check your understanding. You can also use our built-in playground to practice your JavaScript coding. In the next chapter, we will be diving into the technicals of JavaScript coding and introducing variables and data types. See you then!